Christmas tree at the Christmas party hop. Mistletoe hung where you can see every couple tries to stop. Rocking around the Christmas tree, let the Christmas spirit ring. Later we'll have some pumpkin pie and we'll do some caroling. You will get a sentimental feeling when you hear voices singing, let me jolly deck the halls with boughs of holly.
Wrapping around the Christmas tree, have a happy holiday. Everyone dancing merrily in a new old-fashioned way. Rocking around the Christmas tree, let the Christmas spirit reign. Later we'll have some pumpkin pie and we'll do some caroling. You will get a sentimental feeling when you hear voices singing, let's be jolly, deck the halls with boughs of holly. Rocking around the Christmas tree, have a happy holiday. Everyone's dancing merrily in the new old-fashioned way.
Well, good morning, everybody. My name's James. Welcome to NorthBridge. Yeah, we could celebrate that. I love a little electric guitar in the morning and a little rocking around the Christmas tree. That is awesome. It's awesome to have all of you with us this Christmas season. Did you get all your decorations up by now? Are they all up? Still working on it? Some of you were like, yes. Some of you were like, no, not yet. It's exhausting, right? It's a lot, but you're getting there. You're getting there. Still plenty of time. And we're so glad that you're spending your time with us this Sunday morning. Hope you're having a great weekend. I'll tell you who's having an amazing weekend, and that's our high schoolers, because they are in the Laurel Mountains at Laurelville having a weekend at camp, one of the best weekends of their lives. I mean, if you've been there, you know how much fun it is. Here's some photos of them. They're going to be coming back later this afternoon. And we just ask that you keep them in your thoughts, keep them in your prayers as they come back, and that God would just continue to impact their hearts, their minds, and transform lives, and just leverage that weekend for maximum impact in the lives of our students. But thanks for making that possible. If you're a regular attender here, you really are part of making environments like that, as well as so many others, possible. So thank you, and we're really excited for those kids. Great weekend to be up there. A little bit colder than it is here, but great weekend to be up there. And it's a great weekend for you to be spending your Sunday morning with us. If you're new here, an extra special welcome to you. Thanks for joining us today. We're going to be together for a little bit over an hour. We're kicking off a brand new series with Andy Stanley entitled The Reasons for the Season, so we can't wait to get to that. But before we do, we're going to sing some songs this morning. In fact, we're starting off with a Christmas song. And so if you're online, we invite you to join in, and we're so glad that you're here as well. The lyrics are going to be on the screen at home. Lyrics will be on the screens here in the room. And our first song, it talks about these words that we hear from the prophet Isaiah, where he gives a prophecy 700 years before the birth of Jesus. And he says, a Savior will be born, and his name will be called Emmanuel. Now, we know that his name that was given to him was Jesus, but he was also known as Emmanuel, which means, when translated, God with us. And so if you need hope today, I want you to know that hope has come. It has a name, and his name is Jesus, Emmanuel, God with us. So that's what we're going to be singing about as we start our morning together. So why don't you stand, give somebody a wave and a smile, welcome them here, and I'm going to hand it off to the band. Once again, thanks for joining us.
Through the silence, with glory in the highest, the hope of all creation, resting in his mother's arms. The song on the horizon, ringing through the heavens, the long-awaited Savior, come to set the captives free. Come to set the captives free. Come set us free. Hope has a name, Emmanuel, the light of the world, who broke through the darkness. Oh, hail the King, Emmanuel, the light of the world, the glory of heaven. We didn't see it coming, the story of redemption. It started in a manger, ended in an empty grave. All I know, hope has a name, Emmanuel, the light of the world, who broke through the darkness. Oh, hail the King, Emmanuel, the light of the world, the glory of heaven. Come if you're broken, come if you're searching, and if you need healing, he's where you'll find him. Lay down your burdens and breathe in forgiveness, and if you need freedom, yeah, he's where you'll find him. Oh, if you need freedom, yeah, he's where you find it. Yeah, he's where you find it. Hope has a name, Emmanuel, the light of the world, who broke through the darkness. Oh, hail the King, Emmanuel, the light of the world, the glory of heaven. Hope has a name, Emmanuel, the light of the world, who broke through the darkness. Oh, hail the King, Emmanuel, the light of the world, the glory of heaven.
We're going to continue singing. I love singing this song so much. It's such a great reminder that we are the number one thing to God. He will fight for us. He will do whatever he can so that we can make him number one in our life. Let's sing. For I spoke a word, you were singing over me. You have been so good to me. I took a breath. Before I took a breath, you breathed your life in me. You have been so kind to me. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Oh, it chases me down, fights till I found peace in 99. I couldn't earn it, and I don't deserve it, till you give yourself away. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Yeah. was your foe. When I was your foe, still your love fought for me. You have been so good to me, so good. But I felt no worth, you played it all for me. You have been so kind to me. Sing it out. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Oh, it chases me down, fights till I found peace in 99. I couldn't earn it, I don't deserve it, till you give yourself away. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Sing, there's no shadow. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. Sing it out to him. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. Yeah. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Oh, it chases me down, fights till I found peace in 99. I couldn't earn it, I don't deserve it, till you give yourself away. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. You're always fighting for us. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, God, you do whatever it takes so that we can be focused on you and concentrated on you only. You will break down walls. You will break down anything that hinders you taking that number one space in our life, because you care and you know what is best for us, and that is you. Help us to remember that. Give us that reminder daily that we need you in everything that we do. We pray this all in Jesus' name. Amen.
Thank you for that, Jess. Thank you for singing with us. You can grab a seat. And as you're getting settled, I want to let you know about a whole bunch of stuff that's going on in and around the church. In fact, the first thing I want to talk about is coming up really quickly. It's this Tuesday, and we have not talked about it in this room, and that's because it came up quickly for us as well. And that is a free breakfast this Tuesday morning at 7:30 right here, where you're going to have a chance to meet the Stolberg family and hear about what's going on in Haiti. Now, let me tell you why that's so special and important to us as a church. Ever since, our very first service 15 years ago, we have been in partnership with Haiti and trying to make a difference specifically in the Cap-Haitian region. And we've partnered with several orphanages, and it's been incredible what God has done over the past 15 years. But, just over the past 2 or 3 years, we have not been able to be as involved as we would like to be. We've been involved financially, but we haven't been able to send short-term missions because of the pandemic and really just because of a lot of the political upheaval that's going on in Haiti. And while we have not been able to send teams, the Stolbergs have been there. They have a nonprofit that they run there. And what's it called again? Shout it out from the back. New Roots. They have an organization called New Roots where they teach agricultural skills and they teach business skills, health, nutrition. They even do some employment. If you've been to Haiti, you've been to Ibok Orphanage, and you've done some tutoring there, and you've met many of the students. They've hired some of the students that have graduated to be a part of this incredible effort. And so lots of good stuff. And so while we haven't been able to go to Haiti, you get to hear firsthand on Tuesday morning what's been happening in Haiti. And so if you've been there and you want an update and you just want to know how people are doing and how things are going, you should show up on Tuesday morning, absolutely free. And if you just like to hear what this church has been doing, what the Stolberg family's been doing, what New Roots has been doing, and maybe just learn some before you take a short-term trip with us, because we hope to be gearing those up sooner than later. As soon as we're able to go, we're going to go. Tuesday morning would be a great start for you. All we're asking you to do is register. And so if you're online, throw something up in the chat. We'll send you an email today with the registration link. If you're here in the house, stop by the guest service table and just say, hey, I'm really interested in free breakfast on Tuesday, right? And I want to come and be a part of that, and I want to hear about Haiti. We'll get your email, and we'll send you an email this afternoon, I promise, which will have more info and that registration link, and we look forward to seeing you this Tuesday at 7:30 a.m. Other stuff coming up this Friday, so that's Tuesday. Friday is our Christmas family movie night. We're going to be showing The Grinch, the latest version of that. It's so good. We're going to have refreshments, activities, and crafts for the kids down in the family ministry wing. It really is a fun night. All the chairs are gone, so bring some blankets, some beach chairs, whatever you're comfortable with. You kind of just get to stake out your little plot of carpet, and we just have an incredible night. If you've never been to one, it is really fun and an amazing opportunity to invite people to. So coworkers, family members, especially your neighbors that you've been just, wondering and maybe even praying for an opportunity to invite them to church and come and sit with you. Hey, I get it that sometimes church, just the concept of that can be a barrier for so many people that haven't grown up in church, or maybe they had a bad church experience. I mean, Sunday morning, it's just a big barrier sometimes for them to get over, and that's why we try to create these amazing environments and make it easy for you to invite. But what's easier than a Sunday invite is a Friday invite. Instead of saying, hey, come to church, you get to say, hey, come see The Grinch, come to a movie. They're going to have refreshments, they're going to have activities for the kids, and just come on out. So it's really easy invite and a great experience for them. So that's why we're doing it. So make those invites, go to the registration page, our website or app, you'll see this graphic, just look for the pink box. You can make a reservation, and we look forward to seeing you on Friday evening. I'll be here. I'll be wearing a Grinch t-shirt, and I hope to see you as well. And then Christmas Eve, the 23rd. Actually, why did I say that? I don't know why I keep saying that. I know why I keep saying that. It's the 24th. It's always been the 24th, Christmas Eve. I keep saying the 23rd because there is a 3 involved in the announcement. So Christmas Eve is the 24th, but we're having 2 services, one at 3. Okay, one at 3 p.m. and one at 5 p.m. They're identical. All your favorite Christmas carols, we're going to get to sing those. We're going to have candlelight, a live message, silent night, great performance pieces from the band and the production team. They're just working on creating an incredible experience and invite for you and your friends. We're just asking you to show up and make those invites. Again, Christmas Eve, such a powerful time to make an invite. I mean, when you think about it, our culture is celebrating Christmas, and the church is celebrating Christmas. And on Christmas Eve, those kind of 2 things collide. Our culture is out there singing about sleigh bells and, white Christmases, and I love all that stuff too, right? And we are here to celebrate a Savior's birth, and every once in a while, those 2 things collide and overlap. In fact, the other night, I was surfing through the channels, and I don't know why, but I stopped at the Rockefeller Christmas tree lighting. Yeah, it was awesome, right? And Gwen Stefani and Blake Shelton were singing a song, and so I stuck around, and they were singing about sleigh bells or something. But then it happened to be the moment where they were going to hit the button and light the tree. And sure enough, they hit the button, and this amazing tree lit up. And as soon as the tree lit up, and if you were watching it, I don't know if you caught it, but there's this choir on stage, and all of a sudden they just start singing Joy to the World. And just blasting through my TV speakers is Joy to the World, the Lord has come. Let earth receive her King. That's where New York City, Rockefeller Square was at in the middle of this week. That's where our culture is at. So many people are ready. Their hearts are primed for an invite. They really want to know at the core of their being and in their soul what this is about. And you hold the power of an invite. It's that simple. Come with me on the 24th. Come sit with me. That's all you got to do. I'll pick you up. I'll wait for you at the doors. We'll create the experience. You make the invite and trust God with the rest. But I'm telling you, there's no other time like Christmas Eve. Such a unique opportunity to make that invite. And for many of you, and some of you were here this morning, I know your stories. Your very first Sunday with us wasn't a Sunday. It was Christmas Eve. And that changed everything for you. And then you came back in the new year, and God just changed the whole trajectory of your life. And so imagine that for whoever you want to invite and whoever God's laying on your heart. So we're praying for those invites, and we look forward to seeing you on the 24th at 3 or 5 p.m. At this time, we're going to move into a time of giving. Almost all of our giving is done online these days. We don't pass buckets or have offering plates. And so all the instructions will be up on the screen in just a moment. You can text to give. You can go online to give. But there is a drop box at the back of the room. Same stuff will pop up on your screen online. Thank you for your generosity as well. And as we take this time to give, I want you to know that if you're new in the house or new online, there's no expectation that you would give today. You're our guest. In fact, we want to give something to you. And so if you haven't stopped by the guest service table, please do that before you leave. We'd love to meet you and get that gift into your hands. And online, just click on today's links and I'm new, and we'll drop one of those gifts in the mail for you today as well. Once again, thank you so much for joining us. So let's take some time to give, and then we'll just take a couple of seconds to sync up with North Point as we start our brand new Christmas series with Andy Stanley live this morning, entitled The Reasons for the Season.
Voila. It's perfect. Scotty! Sit. Who's a good little lamb? Stay.
Well, look at that. You've outdone yourself again this year.
I didn't I?
Yeah. Oh, how adorable. Good boy, Scotty. Good boy.
No!
So good morning, everybody, and Merry Christmas. Thanks for joining us from wherever you're joining us from. No doubt you have already seen, or you will soon begin to see, the signs and the bumper stickers and the clings that say, Jesus is the reason for the season. You may have already seen one of these. In fact, you may have one of these on your car or somewhere on a Christmas decoration in your house. And I certainly appreciate the sentiment behind this, that Jesus versus the commercialization of Christmas. Let's keep Christ in Christmas. Jesus is the reason that we celebrate Christmas. But if Jesus was correct, and of course I think Jesus was certainly correct, and if the authors of the New Testament were correct, and I certainly think they were correct as well, it may be more accurate to say that you are the reason for the season, and you are the reason for the season, and I'm the reason for the season, because without us, there would be no Christmas. Or more to the point, if we weren't such a mess, right? If we weren't such a mess, no Christmas. For God so loved this rebel race, we talk about this all the time. For God so loved this rebel race that he actually moved in our direction, sent us a savior. So maybe, and this is probably a terrible idea, some new clings or some new bumper stickers or maybe some new Christmas tree ornaments are in order. Maybe one that says, I'm the reason for the season. That'll get you in trouble. Or if you don't love where you currently work, maybe a cling that says, my boss is the reason for the season. Or perhaps if you don't want to be invited to Christmas dinner, my mother-in-law is the reason for the season. And I just want to be clear, Jackie, if you're watching, I'm not talking about you. I've just heard stories about other mothers-in-law. Anyway, the point is simply this, that the birth of Jesus was for our benefit, that Christmas was for our benefit, and it benefited us in so many ways. So what we're gonna do for these next 3 times together during this Christmas season, we're gonna talk specifically about, or focus specifically on 3 reasons that Jesus came and how Jesus benefited us, and how that very first Christmas and the Christmases thereafter really were for us because, well, for God so loved the world. And the first reason we're going to talk about actually comes to us, and this is going to be a little bit different angle. It comes to us by way of what I'm referring to as the story of Christmas. Now, we're all familiar with the Christmas story, but some of us aren't as familiar with the story of Christmas, or specifically the backstory to the Christmas story. And the story of Christmas does not begin with a pregnant teenager who's wondering exactly how in the world did I become pregnant. It actually begins with a couple who could not get pregnant. It begins with a couple, this is the amazing thing about the story of Christmas. It begins with a couple who lived 2,000 years before the first Christmas, who wanted to have a child and they were not able to have a child. It begins with, it's a remarkable story that begins with as we discover, a less than remarkable man named Abram. We know him as Abraham. So here's how the author of Genesis begins the story of Christmas, the backstory to the Christmas story. It says this, it says, the Lord, God, said to Abram, who will eventually become Abraham, I want you to go from your country and your people and your father's household to the land that I will show you. Now, we're not told why God chose Abram, just as we're not told why God specifically chose Joseph and Mary. But what we do know, we don't know why God chose them, but here's what we do know. In ancient times, somewhat like modern times, but even more so, in ancient times, a person's country, a person's people, and a person's household represented security and protection. And God says to this man that he seemingly just chose because he just needed somebody to get this thing kicked off. He says to Abraham, I want you to leave essentially everything that you know and everything that provides you with security. And in exchange, here's what I'm going to do for you. And this is where the story begins. God says to Abram, if you'll do what I've asked you to do, I'm going to make you a great nation. Now, interesting, and maybe you know this, Abraham is about 75 years old when God says to him, hey, I want you to leave everything, I'm going to make you a great nation. And perhaps because he and Sarah were not able to have children, he was thinking, I don't know about great nation. I'd be happy just being a great grandfather, right? Or just a great grandfather. I don't know about the nation thing, but God wasn't finished. The promise goes on like this. He says, and I'm going to bless you and I will make your name great. The reason that all of us have heard of Abraham before today is because this promise certainly came true. His name became great, but there was even more. And what God says to Abraham next really is what sets the stage for the Christmas story. And again, 2,000 years before the first Christmas. Here's what God says to Abraham. And you will be a blessing, which means, Abraham, somebody in the world is going to be better off because of you. And of course, the question he would ask is, who? And this really is the amazing, unbelievable part of the promise, because what God promises next was absolutely impossible, unthinkable, unimaginable. Here's who God says would be better off because of this man, Abraham, and his faith and his decision to follow. Here's what he says. And all peoples on earth will be blessed, or all peoples on earth will be better off because of you. Now, this was unimaginable just on the surface, but within that cultural context, you need to know that in ancient times, people did not bless one another. They conquered, they enslaved, and they plundered one another. But no, they did not bless one another. But in spite of this, Abraham, we're told, believed God's promise, as outlandish as it was, obeyed God and left all of his security, everything he knew, followed God. And even though he was obedient to God, Abraham did not live long enough to see this promise fulfilled. He and Sarah, as you probably know, eventually do have a son, Isaac, and then begins the story of one of the most dysfunctional families you can imagine. Regardless of how dysfunctional your family is, you just look at the family or trace the family and the lineage of Abraham, and I mean, it really is unimaginable. If you've ever wondered, have I gone so far that God could never use me? Just study the story of Abraham. In fact, just a couple of interesting tidbits. Abraham, in fact, the dysfunction really begins with him. Abraham, at one point along the way, meets a king, and Sarah is so beautiful, he's absolutely convinced the king is going to kill him and steal his wife and put Sarah in his harem. And so Abraham lies. Imagine this, ladies. Abraham lies and says, no, she's not my wife. She's my sister. And sort of technically she was his sister. And then Isaac, their son, their only son together, actually does the same thing with his wife, lies about his wife and says, no, because she was so beautiful. No, she's my sister. And then it just goes from there. Isaac has a couple of sons. They hate each other. They literally, their families go to war with one another. One of Isaac's sons, as you know, if you know the story, actually had 12 sons, and 10 of the sons actually sold one of their brothers into slavery, and it just goes on and on and on. So early on, nobody in Abraham's family was being blessed, and nobody was being blessed because of Abraham's family. Eventually, the whole family ends up in Egypt as slaves. And as a slave nation, as a slave state, they certainly aren't in a position to bless anybody. Then, if you know the story, God sent Moses. This is hundreds of years later. God sent Moses. And by the time Moses led the nation of Israel out of, slavery, Egypt was not feeling very blessed. Not very long after that, the Canaanites were not feeling very blessed either. So this goes on and on and on. And perhaps people had forgotten about God's promise to Abraham. Perhaps they had toned it down a bit. But if you would pause the story at that point in the story and say, wait a minute, Abraham, descendants of Abraham, God told, your forefather that the whole world was going to be blessed through him. And we don't see any of that happening. In fact, we don't even see the potential for that happening. Hundreds of years go by, 1,000 years after, think about it, 1,000 years after God made Abraham this promise. His descendants are so large, they have become an official kingdom. We know it as the kingdom of Israel. But as a kingdom, even then, they don't bless the nations around them. Their first two kings go to war with all the nations around them. And then their third king makes a terrible decision. The third king, Solomon, decides to marry the daughters of the surrounding nations, worship the gods of the surrounding nations. And before long, instead of blessing the nation of Israel has become just like the nations they were supposed to bless. And then if you know the story, God judges the nation, divides the nation. He actually sends the surrounding nations into the nation of Israel to punish them. At some point, literally, God puts the best and the brightest of them in time out because they've been so disobedient and so unfaithful to God. At one point in the story, Nebuchadnezzar's stormtroopers, as you may know, come into Jerusalem and destroy Solomon's temple. And if you pause the story at that point, you would say the opportunity's lost. Perhaps as a kingdom, especially during the reign of Solomon, the golden rule, the golden age of Israel, there was an opportunity there to do something for the nations, to be a blessing to the world. And you squandered that opportunity. You lost that opportunity. That opportunity has come and it's gone. But in spite of the fact that Israel wasn't even in a position to bless herself, God is the promise keeper. God is the promise keeping God. And in the midst of all the chaos, in the midst of all the turmoil and all the death and the disruption, God from time to time would send a prophet to speak to the nation. And prophet after prophet would remind the nation that God has a plan for you and God's not giving up on the promise. And even though it seems out of reach and unattainable, God is at work and God is going to keep his promise to Abraham. Isaiah was one of those prophets. Imagine how these words must have sounded and must have felt at a time of economic turmoil, at a time, again, when they couldn't even care for themselves, much less think about being a blessing to anybody else. Isaiah writes these famous words. He says, I will also, this is God speaking to the nation, I will also make you a light for the Gentiles. I'm going to make you a light, a bright, shining example to all the surrounding nations, that my salvation may reach to the ends of the earth. To which they must have thought, a light to the Gentiles? It's dark in our nation. How are we going to be a light to anybody? Besides that, the Gentiles, they're not impressed with us. They're not impressed with Yahweh. Israel couldn't even save herself. How in the world is she going to bring salvation to the ends of the earth? This was insulting. Their economy at this time was in shambles. Nobody's feeling blessed. Nobody's in a position to bless anybody. There is no possible way what God promised Abraham all those years ago was going to take place. Then around 436 BC, 1,600 years. It's very difficult for us to get our minds around this time period. 1,600 years after God makes the promise to Abraham, 1,600 years later, God sends another prophet, the prophet Malachi. And again, if we were living in that day and age, if we were living within Judea or even what would be Galilee, we would hear these words and we think, this is impossible. This is insulting. Malachi comes along and he says this, don't give up hope. Don't surrender hope. Don't quit believing. And to which, the people are like, what? Malachi says, my name, again, God's speaking to the prophet, my name will be great among the nations. The people of Israel are like, if they'd had an opportunity to respond, they would say, no, it won't. You don't understand. Your name is being mocked among the nations. Your nation, no offense, God, is pathetic. Look at us. We can't feed ourselves. We can't protect ourselves. So stop with all the hype. I mean, Zeus, the name of Zeus will be great among the nations. Eventually, the name of Jupiter will be great among the nations. And buckle up because Alexander is about to leave his mark on the nations. And his name will be great, right? It becomes his nickname, Alexander the Great. But not Yahweh, and not Israel, and not our kingdom. Malachi wasn't even finished. Listen to this. He says, no, God's not finished. From where the sun rises to where it sets, that is, everywhere in the world, in every place, he doubles down, in every place, incense and pure offerings will be brought to me, because my name will be great among the nations, says the Lord Almighty. And nobody took him seriously, and we would not have either, because it was impossible. It was out of reach. The nation had already been overrun by the Assyrians, the Babylonians, the Persians, the Macedonians, and it went on and on and on. Then to add insult to injury, 63 BC, Pompey comes to Judea, takes the city of Jerusalem by force, murders about half the priesthood, and annexes that entire region into the Roman Empire, the Republic of Rome. And so begins the famous Roman occupation of Judea and Galilee. So clearly, if we'd shown up in that part of the story, if we'd hit pause and reflected on what God told Abraham, three things were absolutely clear. All the nations would not be blessed through Abraham. Israel would not be a light to the Gentiles. And clearly, their God would not be worshiped throughout the world because nobody was interested in a God who was too weak to take care of his own people. And then when things were as hopeless as they could have possibly been, then when God's promise to Abraham was completely and hopelessly out of reach, God moved. In fact, the Apostle Paul, who was a Pharisee, who then becomes a Jesus follower, he's looking back on this entire story arc because as a Pharisee, he knew the Old Testament backwards and forwards. He knew the history of his own people. He was able to put all of this in context. And just a few years after the resurrection of Jesus, as he contemplates this story and how God fulfilled his promise to Abraham through Jesus, here's how he sets it up. I love this phrase. Here's how Paul writes it. He says, when the set time had fully come. I love this. When the set time had fully come. In other words, when God had everything just the way he wanted it. An expanding empire. An expanding empire that was exporting a common culture and a common language. A highway system, a seaport system that connected all the major world population centers. A means by which to export this message that was for the world and to the world. When the set time had fully come, when things were just the way God wanted them to be, God finally, the nation would eventually understand, those who became Jesus followers. God finally sent the angel Gabriel to Nazareth, a town in Galilee, to a virgin pledged to be married to a man named Joseph, a descendant of David. And the virgin's name was Mary. So you see, if you stop, and it's so difficult for us to get our mind around this many years and this kind of a story arc, but in some ways, in fact, in many ways, the story of Christmas or the backstory to the Christmas story, the story of Christmas with all of its crazy twists and turns, all of the off-ramps and the interruptions and the dead ends and the ends and the it's never gonna happen. The story of Christmas actually makes the Christmas story much easier to believe. A narrative, think about it, that played out over 2,000 years. When Jesus was finally born, Babylon was uninhabitable. When Jesus was born, the entire Persian Empire had been greatly diminished. When Jesus was born, Alexander's, kingdom had been carved up. Rome was considered eternal, but eventually even Rome would capitulate to the baby king. And perhaps, this is just my opinion, perhaps the reason God waited so long was a political reason. Perhaps God was making somewhat of a political point, namely that the kingdoms of this world do not have the capacity to bless the world, only rule the world. So we shouldn't be surprised that years later when the baby of Bethlehem becomes the prophet and becomes the rabbi Jesus. We shouldn't be surprised that when Satan, as Matthew records for us, that when Satan took Jesus, remember this narrative from his life? When Satan took Jesus to a very high mountain and he showed him, what did he show him? All the kingdoms of this world and their splendor. And he says to Jesus, Jesus, I will give you all of this. I will surrender all of these kingdoms to you. If you will simply surrender to me for a moment, if you will simply bow down and recognize me as your superior for just a moment, if you'll just bow down and worship me. And you remember what Jesus said. These are my words, not his. No, thank you. No, thank you. That's not why I've come. I've not come to assume command. I've not come to assume command of a network of failed kingdoms filled with peacekeepers, but not peacemakers. I've not come to conquer the world. I've come to bless the world by giving my life for the world, to demonstrate the way forward for the world. The virgin's name was Mary, and the angel went to her and said, again, unimaginable, but the whole story's unimaginable. The backstory, these stories, it's all unimaginable. You will conceive, the angel says, and give birth to a son, and you are to call him Jesus, and he will be great. And again, how great will he be? Well, finally, the name of Abraham is great, and Jesus, your son, will be even greater. He will be great, and he is going to be called, unlike Abraham, unlike anyone who's ever lived before or will ever live. He will be called the Son of the Most High. And so, God kept his promise. Israel would, in fact, be a light to the world. The God of Israel would, in fact, and is, in fact, being worshiped throughout the world. And the world would, in fact, be blessed through Abraham. The world would be better off because of Abraham. And so ends the backstory to the Christmas story. A 2,000-year saga. Fascinating, amazing, inspiring. But it's also, if you stop and think about it, it's also a bit convicting. And here's why I say that. And as I thought about this story, and every time I think about it, it is so unimaginable, but it's so real, and it so happened. As I think about it, I think about the implications for me, and I think, honestly, I think about the implications for us. I think about the implications for the church at large, and for men and women who call themselves Christians, and for the pockets of people who consider themselves Jesus followers. The implications are this: if the arrival of Jesus was a blessing to the world, shouldn't Jesus followers be a blessing to the world as well? If using the word that God said to Abraham, that then the angel said to Mary, if the arrival of Jesus was intended to be a blessing and has turned out to be a blessing to the world, should not Jesus followers be a blessing to the world as well? Are we? Am I? Are you? Think about it this way, if the world is better off because of Jesus, shouldn't our world and our communities be better off because of Jesus followers? Is it? And if Jesus is the light of the world, shouldn't our collective presence in the world make the world brighter? Does it? And does it matter? And the answer is, of course it matters. It matters a great deal. And these are good questions for us to ask. These are good questions for us to ask individually as Jesus followers. And these are good questions to ask as a group of churches. And these are especially good questions to ask at this time of the year. Good questions to wrestle with. And from where I sit, if I had to answer those questions specifically for us, and if you're not normally a part of our online stream, and if you're not part of one of our local churches around the city, the state, and really around the world, this may sound a little bit strange, but I'll say it anyway. From where I sit, you are a blessing to your community, and you are a light in our world. And people in your communities and in our neighborhoods and in the areas surrounding our churches, people really are better off because of you. And the reason is not because you're extraordinary or remarkable any more than Abraham was remarkable or extraordinary. The reason is because you have chosen not to be content with simply believing things about Jesus, but you have decided to follow Jesus and to live out the values of Jesus and to embrace the way of Jesus. And whenever a community of people come together and do that, the world becomes a better place. So, at Christmas, God blessed the world with a different kind of king. We talk about that all the time. Who came to establish a different kind of kingdom, an upside down kingdom, an others first kingdom. And wherever and whenever his followers come together to live that out and to embrace and live out that simple kingdom, others first ethic, the world is a better and blessed place. But as it turns out, to bless the world was just one of 3 reasons God gave us Christmas. And we're going to talk about the second one next time in part 2 of Reasons for the Season. I'd love to pray for us. Heavenly Father, thank you. Thank you for this season. Thank you for what it represents and means to so many of us. And we really do, as your followers and followers of your son, we really do want to get it right. We want to get our part right because we have been so blessed And we see that as an opportunity. In fact, we see it as a stewardship to ensure that the people around us and the communities around us are blessed as well. So teach us how, show us how to be a light to our communities as you have been a light in our lives. And we pray all of that in the matchless name of Jesus, our King. Amen.
Amen. I love how he closed us in prayer and just said, you've been a light to us. Teach us how to be a light to our communities. May that be true of us this week. May we leave this place and go and be the light. As we leave, I also hope that you remember that we've got a breakfast on Tuesday morning at 7:30 if you'd like to hear more about what God's doing in Haiti and through New Roots as an organization. So you can find out more about that by stopping at the info table, and also the movie night on Friday. So lots of opportunities to make some invites and be a part of what God is doing through this season and what he's doing through his church. Next Sunday, we're continuing the series. You just heard Andy talk about it, part 2, and a second reason for the season. Until then, we just hope and pray that you would enjoy the rest of your weekend, that you'd have a great week, and that you'd go in peace. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next Sunday.